between being disappointed and then also the challenge of what do you do when you're disappointed? Well, my tendency has been to run from the disappointment.
What's been the biggest challenge for you on your faith journey? Do you have any advice for other people who are facing challenges or feeling confused or discouraged?
We touched on a bit of the challenges, just that I've been so disappointed by so many people who are exalted in the religious community. Yeah, I guess it's comforting in a way that everyone makes mistakes. Um, I would identify as a person who has perfectionist tendencies. It makes me feel better to know that, okay, they're clearly struggling with something too. I wish they wouldn't have marketed themselves as a direct line to God, but it's nice to know that I can make mistakes and still be forgiven. And maybe that comes from forgiving myself first. But between being disappointed and then also the challenge of what do you do when you're disappointed? Well, my tendency has been to run from the disappointment. If every time I go to a church and there's a pastor and they do something horrible, I leave the church, eventually there's going to be no more churches because everyone is imperfect, and a lot of the issues, unfortunately, that the pastors or youth pastors end up dealing with are going to be an issue for the community. And there are people who choose to stay, and I really commend them for that. So maybe I'm just thinking through this in real time. Perhaps the journey that I'm on with church is a similar journey that I'm on in real life, which is how do I decide when to abandon ship and when to be disciplined about something and persistent and say, no, I'm going to stick with it because there's a love, there's a passion, there's a responsibility. Advice, be honest with yourself. There have been some really terrible things that I've seen come out of churches. And I was unfortunately told by some other members in the church community that I wasn't allowed to feel a particular way about certain events. And I continued to be honest with myself, although it was hard and triggering for a while, but even 12 years later, I now have some, let's say, integrity or honesty that has come from that, and ultimately healing. I was able to think through it, and when no one else in the church could seem to help and heal me in the same way, because we weren't allowed to talk about certain things.
Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure, just because I've known you for a long time, I'm pretty sure I know the issue that you're talking about, which I won't say on the podcast, but yeah, I feel for you because you went through something pretty serious and no one should have been able to tell you how to feel during that, because I'm shocked that you even stayed with the faith after what you experienced. And I'm glad you did, but uh it's painful to hear. I guess people just don't know. They're not trained to respond in that situation like that, but they really botched it with you. I can tell you that. And I'm glad you toughed it out and was
Yeah,
able to see through that.
yeah, and I don't know why. I don't know why I was able to so quickly put the blame on the supposed organization of church and not God Himself. I think I have always felt a strong spiritual connection to God, and probably because of great friends. I mean, even Nathan, experiences that we've had together, sharing music, that has been so spiritual for me. And I wonder if those moments were enough to pull me through to say, no, I know God exists and I know He wants good for me, that these are just evil things that are happening in my life. And I will avoid those as much as possible, but still try to seek God.
What would you say if you were going to pick one thing that people could do to improve the situation? Like one thing a church could do to one day take a step forward to addressing some of these issues. What would you say to them? Like what would be the step that they could take?
Listening and responding to open feedback. Yeah, I said a minute ago that this church journey is similar to my personal journey. It absolutely is. For so many years, I felt like I wasn't allowed to say certain things. And when you feel that way, you build up resentment. And resentment breeds hatred towards people and distrust. And 2 years ago, I couldn't believe who I had become. I basically stopped playing music altogether. I wasn't socializing. I wasn't having spiritual experiences. And what really got me through that was realizing that I wasn't being honest with myself or open to myself or listening to my own feedback and responding to it. And the church is a living, breathing thing, just like anyone else. And if the organization wants to succeed, they can't be a dictatorship and just shut everyone down who has ideas. It needs to be open. People need to feel like they can say the things that are on their mind and have the tough conversations. Because if they don't, nothing will change. And I worry that the church will die. And I worry about that, even though I'm not actively participating right now, because there are people who are positively affected by it. I mean, I don't know what my life would have been like had I not grown up in church. I know that there are so many people who go, even if they're maybe they go once a year. It's enough for them that they can pick up that nugget that keeps them going, that keeps them motivated and gives them the moral compass they need to do the right thing. That is so meaningful, even if the execution of it by the church isn't perfect.
Yeah, those are good points. I hear a lot of the same thing from the people who come to the brewery. Sometimes they'll say, they didn't feel like they could ask questions. Now, part of that's the church format, but part of it is they'd go to a group and they'd ask a question, like something they're wrestling about in the Bible, and they'd just kind of get like shut down, like, oh, you shouldn't be having this question. And they're like, huh? So they walk away and their question's still not answered. I do agree we're not going to know everything. That's part of it. But I think sometimes they are worried about doctrine. They're very worried about making sure people believe the right things. When sometimes I think we've all got a Bible, we've all got resources, we've got God. Like, let people ask their questions. They're not a threat. These people are genuinely trying to explore. If we actually trust God, if we trust the book, then let that journey continue. Let's support people in their journey. And I figure as long as a church is giving like solid teaching, don't worry if everybody has it all right now. Just let them grow with God. That's my
Well,
thought.
on the doctrine level, the audacity that the church thinks that they have it all right, and that they can dictate to other people to think like them. I mean, that is just so the opposite of what Jesus was getting at. I think meet them where they're at, talk to them
Hmm.
through their issues, and you'll see the change.
Yeah, and he did use a lot more questions than he did. There's really only one group of people that he just went after, like was angry with, and that was the religious people. So I think I noticed that a few years ago when one of my old churches was reteaching parts of the New Testament, and I noticed that I'm like, Jesus never gets mad at people who don't know anything about God or who aren't Jewish. Like he helps them and asks them questions, but boy, he doesn't say, "Hey, you've got this wrong and this wrong, and you've got to you've got to think this way." Like, so I think revisiting what is organic spiritual growth like, led by God, actually look like. If we think about that and then we try to come in and support that, I think that would
Yeah,
really help a lot.
absolutely.
Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts. Do you have any last thoughts that you want to share?
I'm so happy to be here on this podcast. I hope I haven't said anything that shies people away from exploring their faith. I hope I've gotten across how much it means to me and that it is so important to have that part of your life because it helps to find purpose. And without that, what are we all doing?
Hmm.
I mean, if you're open to an experience with God, He'll talk to you. I've heard it before.
That's awesome. It is tough because obviously I mean, you and I have both been through good and bad stuff in churches, and we were in the same church for years. In some ways, our church experience was a mixed bag. Like we have
Right.
some heartbreaks, and we also have some highs. You know, we have some great moments of we met each other and we had some camaraderie, you know, musical and just
Yeah.
we developed this friendship through the church. And it's probably also why I stuck with my faith too when I went to college. I like hung on by a thread for a while and then my journey started accelerating. But yeah, sometimes the reality for people is our church experience sometimes is a mixed bag. And I think if we look at those things, we have a chance to figure out how to be more like Jesus and overcome some of these struggles. So thank you. Thank you so much for being on this podcast. Again, listeners, that was Tyler Habig, a friend of mine from my hometown in Indiana. And yeah, we will be back soon with another episode. We'll see ya.